I was standing about 40 feet away when it happened. That's the thing about moments like this, you don't see them coming. You're just there in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, eating a sandwich or checking your phone, and then the world shifts, and suddenly you're a witness to something you'll spend years trying to explain to people who weren't there. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd taken the day off work specifically to walk around central London without the weekend crowds. My sister had been visiting from Glasgow, and she'd never seen the changing of the guard. She's the kind of person who makes lists of things she wants to do, and this had been sitting near the top of hers for years. So we went. We got there early, found a decent spot near the railings on the mall side, and waited. The square was packed, but not suffocating. Maybe 500–600 people spread across the area, families with children on their shoulders, Japanese tourists with proper camera equipment, a school group in matching yellow vests being herded by two exhausted-looking teachers. The pigeons were doing their usual thing, strutting between people's feet, completely unbothered by the size of the crowd. It was overcast, the way London gets in early October, not cold enough for a proper coat, but cool enough that you keep one hand in your pocket. The kind of sky that can't make up its mind. Pale gray light washing everything out just slightly, making the scarlet tunics of the guards look almost unreal, almost painted. My sister kept saying she felt like she was on a film set. I told her that's just how it always feels here. The guards had taken their positions, two of them at the gates, still as statues, chins slightly raised, eyes pointed somewhere past the crowd at a fixed invisible point. I've seen them hundreds of times, and it still does something to you. There's a weight to that stillness, a kind of controlled presence that doesn't look entirely human when you're watching it from a distance. The crowd was relaxed, happy even. People were holding their phones up, taking photos, trying to get their children to stand in front of the guards without getting too close. A little boy in a red jumper kept edging forward, daring himself, glancing back at his father for permission he wasn't getting. I'd stopped paying close attention, honestly. I was watching a woman nearby trying to manage a pushchair and a camera at the same time. My sister was talking about finding somewhere to get lunch after. That's when the energy shifted. I didn't hear what happened first. I felt it, this ripple through the crowd, the way people suddenly stopped their conversations mid-sentence and looked in the same direction. That collective awareness that something has changed before your brain has even registered what. Then I heard it, a shout, short and sharp like something had been knocked over. I looked toward the guard position on the left side of the gate. There were two men, young, early 20s maybe, one in a gray hoodie, one in a dark jacket. They'd come from somewhere behind the crowd or moved through it, or maybe they'd been standing nearby and no one had marked them. They'd gotten past the barrier line somehow, not the main gate, but the side railing area where the public can stand close during the ceremony. The one in the gray hoodie, he'd grabbed at the guard. From behind, grabbed at his shoulder, his uniform, trying to pull him sideways. It wasn't a punch. It was more like a shove and a grab combined, and it lasted maybe 2 seconds, and even watching it happen, I couldn't fully process what I was seeing. My brain kept trying to reframe it as something else, a stumble, a fall, an accident. Because the idea of someone physically attacking a royal guard in broad daylight, with hundreds of people watching, didn't fit into any category of thing that happens. But it happened. The other man, the one in the dark jacket, had moved to the side, blocking the sightline from the crowd, or trying to. Whether that was intentional or he was just panicking, I couldn't say. But the effect was that for a half second, a lot of the people nearest to me didn't see what was happening clearly. I only saw it because I was slightly elevated. I'd stepped up onto the low curb of the pavement. The guard didn't make a sound. That's the part that still sits with me. He was grabbed from behind, half-spun, and he didn't shout, didn't react the way a normal person would react when someone grabs you, that gasp, that curse, that instinctive backward step. He absorbed the movement, his feet planted, his body didn't fold. For one fraction of a second, I thought maybe he hadn't registered it, the way you sometimes don't feel a knock until the adrenaline clears. But then he moved. Not away from the man, toward him. He turned into the grab, stepped his right foot out to square himself, and his arm came around, not striking, but locking. A control hold. The kind of movement that has been drilled so many times it doesn't require thinking. The man in the gray hoodie, who had probably expected the guard to be rigid, mechanical, ceremonially frozen, clearly hadn't prepared for that. He stumbled. He made a sound, a short, surprised bark. The second guard, the one further down the gate, was already moving. That's the detail that struck me later when I was thinking it through. He hadn't broken his stance until the moment of contact. But the moment it happened, he was moving, like something had been released, like there had been a wire pulled tight all along and no one had known it was there. The sirens came so fast it felt wrong, like someone had pressed a button off stage. 3 seconds, maybe 4, from the moment of contact to the moment the first siren started cutting across the square. A lot of people in the crowd hadn't even looked up yet. They were still reacting to the sound, the shout, the commotion, trying to orient themselves, turning to each other asking what's happening. What is that? Did something just? I heard a woman near me say, "Oh God," very quietly. My sister grabbed my arm. The uniformed officers were there almost before it made sense. 2, then 3, moving fast across the pavement from positions I hadn't noticed them standing in, which I suppose is exactly the point. The man in the gray hoodie was on the ground. Not hurt, or at least not visibly, more collapsed under the weight of what had suddenly descended on him. His friend, the one in the dark jacket, had backed up, hands out, already trying to signal something, surrender maybe, or confusion, or both. The crowd had pulled back in that instinctive way crowds do, like a wave reversing. People pressing into each other, phones coming up, a child somewhere beginning to cry from the sudden noise and movement rather than any understanding of what was happening. A woman a few feet from me turned to her husband and said, in a completely flat voice, "I told you we should have gone to Bath." I don't know why, but I remember that clearly. The way some part of the brain keeps operating on its normal frequency even when everything around it is surreal. The square didn't clear immediately. Police presence expanded, more officers appearing from different directions, radio communication buzzing, the low authoritative tone of instruction carrying across the air without being quite audible. The 2 men were being moved, quickly, firmly, the kind of handling that leaves no room for interpretation. The guard who had been attacked, he was back at his post. I need you to understand how strange that looked. 60 seconds, maybe 90, after someone had physically grabbed him from behind and tried to pull him from his position, he was standing there again. Same posture, same raised chin, same eyes fixed on that invisible middle-distance point. His uniform had been straightened. Or maybe it never looked wrong, maybe that's something they practice too, the ability to resettle quickly. And if you had walked into the square at that moment and not seen what came before, you would have seen nothing out of the ordinary. I turned to my sister. She was watching him with this expression I don't have an exact word for, something between disbelief and admiration. "He just went back," she said. "Yeah. Like nothing happened." "I think that's the point," I said, though I didn't fully understand it myself until later. The crowd settled. Not immediately. For a while there was the buzz of it, people talking to strangers, comparing what they'd seen from different angles, checking their phones to see if anything was being reported. A teenager nearby was already watching a clip. Someone had filmed it, of course. Several people had filmed it, probably from 5 different angles. I didn't feel like watching the clip. I'd been there. The ceremony resumed after a delay. Or rather, the formal elements that had been paused or disrupted picked back up, officers repositioning, the visible security presence remaining elevated but no longer urgent. The square refilled. The school group in yellow vests was still there, the teachers now looking significantly less bored than before. The little boy in the red jumper, the one who'd been edging toward the guards earlier, was standing completely still next to his father, watching the guard at the gate. He wasn't trying to get closer anymore. He was just watching. Later, walking along the mall toward St. James's Park, my sister asked me what I thought had made them do it. I said I didn't know. She asked if I thought the guard had been scared. I thought about that for a moment, not in the way you think about a question you don't know the answer to, but in the way you think about something you want to answer honestly. I think, I said, he probably felt what anyone would feel, for a second. But I think whatever they train into them, that thing that makes them stand still for hours while people photograph them and kids wave in their faces and tourists try to make them blink. I think that same thing is what happened when he turned around. It wasn't a decision. It was just what he does. She was quiet for a bit. "That's a strange way to live," she said. "Probably," I said, "but someone has to." I looked it up when I got home. Found a few brief reports, an incident at the palace, 2 individuals detained, no injuries, security protocols engaged. It was described in exactly the neutral administrative language that strips all texture from things. Reading it, you'd have no sense of the crowd, or the sound, or the way the sirens hit the square before anyone had fully processed what was happening. You'd have no sense of that moment, the guard turning into the grab, feet planting, arm coming around. That quiet, terrible competence of someone who had trained for a thing you hope will never come, and then it came, and they were ready. Some people dismiss the royal guards as ceremonial, decorative. Historical furniture in red coats. Standing on that curb, watching what I watched, I don't think I'll ever quite see it that way again. There's a thing that happens sometimes at the end of an event that's larger than you expected. A kind of silence inside, even when there's noise around you. Like your mind has gone quiet because it's full. Walking back through the park, the sky had darkened a little. Leaves on the path. The distant sound of the city doing its thing, indifferent and enormous. My sister found a cafe near the Victoria Memorial. We sat by the window, and she ordered tea she didn't finish, and I ordered coffee that went cold while I stared at nothing. At some point she said, "Do you think he's still out there, still standing there?" I looked at my watch. Thought about the timing of the shifts, the rotation schedules I half remembered from articles I'd read years ago. "Probably someone is," I said. She nodded slowly. Outside the cafe window, a red double-decker went past. A couple took a selfie on the steps of the monument. Pigeons regrouped on the pavement. London kept going, the way it always does. The way I thought those guards are trained to keep going too. Through whatever comes. Still upright. Ready.